Hey there, you're looking kind of cute. Don't forget to subscribe and check out all my other socials. Enjoy. The bell above the door chimed as the last customer of the day exited the small bookstore. A sigh of relief escaped Ryan's lips as he flipped the sign to closed and began tidying up for the evening. Stacks of novels and non-fiction works surrounded him, their spines a colorful array in the warm lighting. He ran a hand through his shaggy brown hair, feeling the exhaustion of another long day settle into his bones. At 32, Ryan had achieved his dream of owning his own bookshop, but the demands of running a small business often left him drained. Still, he wouldn't trade it for anything. Books had always been his escape, a way to live vicariously through characters bolder and more adventurous than himself. As Ryan shelved the last few returns, his foot caught on a stack of boxes he'd meant to unpack earlier. He stumbled, arms pinwheeling as he tried to catch his balance. His temple connected with the sharp corner of a shelf, and pain exploded through his skull before everything went dark. The first thing Ryan noticed as consciousness returned was the antiseptic smell. His head throbbed, and he squinted against the harsh fluorescent lighting. A hospital room slowly came into focus around him. "Oh, thank goodness you're awake!" A nurse bustled into view, checking his vitals. "How are you feeling, sir?" Ryan opened his mouth to respond, but the words died on his tongue. "Sir? That didn't feel right." A sense of profound wrongness washed over him. "I'm not sure," he managed, voice scratchy from disuse. "What happened?" "You had quite a fall at your bookstore," the nurse explained. "You've been unconscious for a couple of days with a nasty concussion. Do you remember your name?" He hesitated. The name Ryan floated to the surface of his mind, but it felt foreign, ill-fitting. Another name pushed its way forward, one that resonated deep in his core. "Finley," he said softly. "My name is Finley." The nurse's brow furrowed slightly. "I'm sorry, but our records show your name as Ryan Mitchell. Perhaps you're still a bit confused from the head injury?" Finley shook her head, wincing at the movement. "No, I know who I am. I'm Finley. I'm a woman." The nurse's expression softened with understanding. "I see. Well, Finley, let me go fetch the doctor. We'll want to run a few more tests to make sure everything's okay." As the nurse left, Finley sank back against the pillows, mind reeling. She knew this body wasn't right, knew that for years she'd been living a lie. The accident had shattered some internal wall, allowing her true self to emerge. The thought was terrifying and exhilarating all at once. The next few days passed in a blur of tests, examinations, and concerned looks from doctors. They found no physical reason for Finley's insistence on her identity, chalking it up to a psychological shift brought on by the trauma. She was eventually released with instructions to follow up with a therapist. Stepping back into the bookstore felt surreal. Everything looked the same, and yet Finley saw it all through new eyes. Her eyes caught on a display of romance novels featuring heroines with flowing hair and curve-hugging dresses. A pang of longing hit her chest. "Ryan? Oh, thank God you're okay." Finley turned to see her assistant manager, Mike, hurrying towards her. She steeled herself for the conversation ahead. "Mike, we need to talk," she began hesitantly. "Some things have changed, and, my name is Finley now. I'm a woman." Mike's eyes widened in surprise, but to his credit, he recovered quickly. "Oh, okay, Finley, wow, that's a big change. Are you sure? I mean, with the head injury and all?" "I've never been more certain of anything," Finley said firmly. "I know it's a lot to take in, but I hope I can count on your support." Mike nodded slowly. "Of course. It might take some getting used to, but you're still my boss and my friend, whatever you need." Tears pricked at Finley's eyes, and she gave Mike a wobbly smile. "Thank you. That means more than you know." The next few weeks were a whirlwind of changes. Finley threw herself into researching transition options, connecting with online support groups, and slowly coming out to friends and family. Some were supportive, others skeptical, but Finley refused to back down. She knew who she was now, and she was done hiding. Her first shopping trip for women's clothing was simultaneously thrilling and nerve-wracking. Finley's hands shook as she rifled through racks of blouses and skirts, overwhelmed by the options. A kind sales associate noticed her distress and offered assistance. "First time shopping in this section?" the woman asked gently. Finley nodded, feeling heat rise to her cheeks. "Is it that obvious?" "Don't worry, honey. We'll find you something perfect." With the associate's help, Finley left the store with an armful of bags. She'd chosen flowing skirts in jewel tones, soft sweaters, and a few dresses that made her feel pretty for the first time in her life. The weight of the shopping bags felt like possibility, like freedom. Back at home, Finley stood before the mirror, heart pounding. She slipped on an emerald green wrap dress, the fabric cool against her skin. Tentatively, she applied a swipe of tinted lip balm and a touch of mascara. The person staring back at her wasn't quite who she wanted to be yet, but it was closer than she'd ever been before. "Hello, Finley," she whispered to her reflection, a smile spreading across her face. The next morning, Finley took a deep breath before unlocking the bookstore. She smoothed down her floral skirt, adjusted the soft cardigan she wore over a simple camisole. Her hair was growing out, just brushing her shoulders now. She'd watched countless tutorials to style it into soft waves. As customers trickled in throughout the day, Finley braced herself for stares or awkward questions. To her surprise, most barely batted an eye. A few regulars did double takes, but their confusion quickly gave way to genuine interest in her journey. "You seem happier," one elderly woman remarked as Finley rang up her purchase. "It suits you, dear." Finley beamed. "I am happier, thank you for noticing." As the seasons changed, so did Finley. She started hormone therapy, watching with wonder as her body slowly aligned with her true self. Her face softened, curves developed where there had been none before. She experimented with makeup, reveling in the artistry of it. Bold red lipstick became her armor on difficult days, a declaration of her femininity to the world. Her wardrobe expanded, reflecting her growing confidence. Finley discovered a love for vintage-inspired dresses, their nipped waists and full skirts making her feel elegantly feminine. She learned to walk in heels, the click of them against the bookstore's hardwood floors, a reminder of how far she'd come. One crisp autumn morning, Finley stood arranging a window display. She wore a burgundy sweater dress, cinched at the waist with a wide belt, and ankle boots. Her chestnut hair, now past her shoulders, was swept into a messy updo. As she fussed with the book placement, she caught sight of her reflection in the glass. For the first time, the person staring back at her was undeniably Finley. Not a trace of Ryan remained. She paused, taking in the moment. Her eyes, once wary and guarded, now sparkled with life. The shy, withdrawn bookstore owner was gone, replaced by a woman who radiated quiet confidence. The bell above the door chimed, and Finley turned with a welcoming smile. "Good morning. Can I help you find anything?" The customer, a man about her age, seemed momentarily flustered. I'm looking for a gift for my niece. She likes fantasy novels." "Of course, I have some great recommendations." Finley led him to the young adult section, chatting easily about various series and authors. As she handed him a stack of books to consider, their fingers brushed. A spark of electricity seemed to pass between them. "I'm David," he said, a shy smile playing at his lips. "I don't suppose you'd want to grab coffee sometime? To discuss books, of course." Finley felt a blush creep up her cheeks. This was new territory. She hadn't dated since her transition. But looking at David's warm brown eyes and kind smile, she found herself nodding. "I'd like that," she replied. "I'm Finley, by the way." As David left with his purchases and Finley's number, she hugged herself with quiet joy. This was the life she was meant to live, full of possibility and connection. The accident that had seemed like a disaster had actually been the key to unlocking her true self. Finley ran her hands down the soft fabric of her dress, reveling in the sensation. She thought of the journey ahead, continuing her transition, building new relationships, maybe even finding love. For the first time in her life, she couldn't wait to see what the future held. That evening, as Finley closed up the shop, she paused to look around. The bookstore had always been her sanctuary, but now it felt like so much more. It was the place where she'd been reborn, where she'd found the courage to embrace her authentic self. She trailed her fingers along the spines of the books, each one a story waiting to be told. Finley smiled, realizing she was finally the protagonist of her own tale. No longer content to live vicariously through fictional characters, she was writing her own adventure. As she stepped out into the cool night air, Finley took a deep breath. The city bustled around her, full of endless possibilities. She straightened her shoulders, head held high. Whatever challenges lay ahead, she would face them as her true self. Confident, resilient, and unapologetically Finley. The streetlights cast a warm glow on the pavement as Finley made her way home. Her heels clicked a steady rhythm, each step a reminder of the woman she'd become. She passed her reflection in a storefront window and couldn't help but smile. The burgundy sweater dress hugged her curves in all the right places, and her updo had held up well throughout the day. As she walked, Finley's mind wandered to the upcoming coffee date with David. It had been years since she'd felt the flutter of attraction, the anticipation of getting to know someone new. Part of her was nervous. Would he still be interested once he knew about her transition? But a larger part was excited. This was a chance to experience dating as her authentic self. Finley unlocked the door to her apartment, kicking off her boots with a sigh of relief. She padded to the bedroom, shedding her clothes and slipping into a silky nightgown. The fabric whispered against her skin, another small pleasure she had denied herself for so long. Settling at her vanity, Finley began her nightly skincare routine. She massaged cleanser into her skin, noting how it had softened with hormone therapy. As she applied moisturizer, her fingers traced the subtle changes in her face, the slight fullness in her cheeks, the softening of her jawline. It was a nightly ritual of rediscovery and appreciation. Finley picked up her hairbrush, working it through her chestnut locks. She'd always kept her hair short as Ryan, never allowing it to grow past a certain point. Now she reveled in its length, the way it framed her face and tickled her shoulders. She sectioned it off, carefully braiding it to prevent tangles while she slept. As she crawled into bed, Finley's hand brushed against the journal on her nightstand. She'd started keeping it shortly after her transition began, a way to process her thoughts and track her progress. Propping herself up on her pillows, she opened to a fresh page and began to write. "Another day of firsts," she wrote. First time being asked out as Finley. First time feeling truly comfortable in my own skin at work. It's strange to think how much has changed in just a few months. There are still challenges, of course. Some days the dysphoria hits hard and I struggle to recognize myself in the mirror, but those days are becoming fewer and farther between. I wonder what Ryan would think if he could see me now. Would he be proud? Relieved? I like to think he'd be happy to know that the unease he felt for so long finally has an explanation. That the life he always dreamed of, but could never quite grasp, is finally within reach. Tomorrow brings new adventures. Coffee with David, a meeting with my doctor to discuss the next steps in my transition. Sometimes it feels overwhelming, like I'm trying to cram a lifetime of experiences into these precious months. But then I remind myself that I have time. This isn't a race, it's a journey of becoming. I am Finley, I am a woman, and for the first time in my life, I am truly, completely myself. Finley closed the journal, a sense of peace settling over her. She turned off the bedside lamp and snuggled under the covers, allowing herself to drift off to sleep. In her dreams, she soared through endless skies, free and unencumbered, finally at home in her own skin. The next morning dawned bright and clear. Finley stood before her closet, deliberating over what to wear for her coffee date. She wanted to make a good impression, but also stay true to her personal style. After some consideration, she settled on a vintage-inspired tea dress in a soft blue floral print. She paired it with low heels and a cream cardigan. At her vanity, Finley carefully applied her makeup. She'd become quite skilled over the past few months, watching countless tutorials and practicing whenever she had a spare moment. Today, she opted for a natural look, a touch of mascara to emphasize her lashes, a hint of blush for a healthy glow, and a swipe of pink lip gloss. As she put the finishing touches on her hair, letting it fall in soft waves around her face, Finley took a deep breath to calm her nerves. "You've got this," she told her reflection. "You're smart, you're interesting, and you deserve to be happy." The coffee shop was bustling when Finley arrived. She spotted David at a corner table, his face lighting up as he saw her approach. He stood to greet her, pulling out her chair with a gentlemanly flourish that made Finley's heart flutter. "You look beautiful," David said, a touch of awe in his voice. "That dress is stunning." Finley felt a blush creep up her cheeks. "Thank you. You look quite handsome yourself." As they settled in with their drinks, a lavender latte for Finley, an Americano for David, conversation flowed easily. They discussed their favorite books, debated the merits of various authors, and shared anecdotes from their respective workplaces. Finley found herself laughing more than she had in years, charmed by David's quick wit and genuine interest in what she had to say. As their cups emptied and the conversation showed no signs of slowing, David suggested they take a walk in the nearby park. Finley agreed, enjoying the way David offered his arm as they strolled along the tree-lined path. "So, Finley," David began, a note of hesitation in his voice, "I hope you don't mind me asking, but... Well, I noticed the trans pride pin on your bag at the bookstore. I just wanted to say that I think it's really brave being open about who you are." Finley's step faltered for a moment, her heart racing. This was the moment of truth. "Thank you," she said softly. "It hasn't always been easy, but I'm happier now than I've ever been. I hope that doesn't change anything between us." David squeezed her hand gently. "Not at all. I like you, Finley. You're smart, funny, and clearly passionate about what you do. The fact that you're trans is just another part of what makes you who you are." Tears pricked at Finley's eyes, and she blinked them away. "That means more than you know," she whispered. They continued their walk, the conversation turning to lighter topics. As the afternoon sun began to dip lower in the sky, David walked Finley back to her bookstore. "I had a wonderful time," he said, a shy smile playing at his lips. "Could I see you again?" Finley nodded, her heart soaring. "I'd like that very much." As David leaned in to place a soft kiss on her cheek, Finley felt a thrill run through her. This was what she'd been missing all those years, the ability to connect with someone as her true self, to feel the spark of attraction and possibility. Watching David walk away, Finley touched her fingers to the spot where he'd kissed her. She felt giddy, lightheaded with joy. For so long, she'd resigned herself to a life of loneliness, convinced that no one could ever truly know or accept her. Now the future stretched out before her, full of promise. Finley unlocked the bookstore, breathing in the familiar scent of paper and ink. She had a few hours before closing, and she threw herself into her work with renewed energy. As she helped customers and reorganized displays, her mind kept drifting back to the afternoon with David. For the first time, Finley allowed herself to imagine a future that included romance, partnership, maybe even a family someday. It wasn't just a far-off dream anymore, it was a real possibility. As the last customer left for the day, Finley began her closing routine. She straightened books, counted the till, and made notes for orders to place in the morning. Just as she was about to lock up, the bell above the door chimed. "I'm sorry, we're actually closed," Finley began, turning around. She stopped short when she saw who had entered. "Mom?" she gasped. Thanks for watching. The rest won't be viewable on YouTube, so check out Patreon if you want more. I hope you have a wonderful day, my cutie.